All right. Welcome to the Beyond Jiu Jitsu Podcast. Today is episode
26.
26. We're talking about Overwatch, Dota, League of Legends, and the toxic community of online gaming, why Kieren has been told to move out, and more.
Why I got kicked out of the gym for illegally heel hooking Adam. No, so today we're talking about gi versus no gi. Is the Jiu Jitsu Gi obsolete now? Is it still relevant? We're going to take a bit of a deep dive into this topic has been discussed at multiple levels from multiple different angles, perspectives. We decided to weigh in, and I think we're going to have different opinions. I sense it in the waters that we may have different opinions.
Yeah, we haven't spoken about this prior to recording, but I don't know if we will. Like, I don't know.
Let's find out.
Let's find out. Keep listening. You shall find out.
So gi versus no gi. Let's establish some parameters here. When we're saying gi versus no gi, I want to tackle this from a holistic approach, right? We're not just talking about competition. I want to talk about, gi versus no gi for self-defense, gi versus no gi for translating to other sports, etc. So what's your initial thought here?
So let's start with self-defense then.
Okay.
The argument that a lot of people make is that gi is irrelevant for self-defense because you're not wearing a gi on the street. And I guess that's more true in this part of the world, somewhere in Sydney where it's, even in winter, it's not, well, it can be quite cold, but it's not like a snowy place. Whereas when I lived in Canada, which is where I first started training jiu-jitsu, it's like everyone's got like a thick parka jacket, or people are pretty much, they're wearing more durable clothes than gis, and everyone is in more or less a gi outdoors.
So I've thought about this argument before, like the whole like winter clothing jacket scenario. I've thought about this a lot because we have spoken about that before.
And don't you just take your shirt off before you fight, though,
exactly.
bro?
I just the pants, get it out. No, so if I was looking to train a specific way for self-defense, I wouldn't want to rely on the clothing of my opponent.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Would agree with that.
I wouldn't my go-to move wouldn't be a cross-collar choke.
Kind of be like a kung fu dude being like, fuck, I left my nunchucks in my other pants.
Exactly. So I wouldn't be going for a bow and arrow choke or some shit like that. I would want to get, a solid submission. Realistically, I think the go-to self-defense, if you can manage it, is a rear naked choke. It's probably the most control you would have over an untrained person.
Yeah.
Either that or mount, arguably.
Or a trained person. Dylan Downes.
Yeah.
Scrub.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my God. Let's not even. So I mean, in terms of self-defense, to be honest, if we're gonna do like a score system, gi, fuck it, let's do a score system. Gi versus no gi. I'm gonna give, to me personally, I'm giving 1 point to no gi for this, because I think no gi translates better to self-defense on the streets.
Yeah, I think so. Those Hannah and Hiram Gracie have done heaps of that sort of women's self-defense or self-defense stuff in general, and they've got some whole series about chokes using T-shirts and stuff like that. And oh my God, actually, those dudes are awesome, but man, oh man, are they cringe for me. I can't stand their advertising. It's so infomercial-ish. But,
pretty extreme.
they've even got ones with, if you had a home invader using a bed sheet to choke them out and stuff.
That's so dumb, man.
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong.
You're not going to think like that. Like, you're not going to think, I saw this video one time, or I did this fucking drill where I used a bed sheet to choke some fucker out. Let me perfectly execute this.
It's starting to get a little bit too...
That's ridiculous.
You know how like they use ropes and stuff in whatever other martial arts as weapons and, silk ribbons and whatever.
Man.
I mean, I would argue that if you were skilled enough to do those bed sheet chokes, that you're probably also skilled enough to do no-gi chokes.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Ironically, I have a similar argument or discussion with my girlfriend a lot because,
about bed sheet chokes.
No, about like self-defense, right? Because, I'm trying to convince her to do something like train jiu-jitsu, for self-defense reasons. But her counter argument is like, oh yeah, but I just punch him in the balls or kick him in the nuts. I'm like,
it doesn't
no,
work
mate,
like that,
it would not work. If you have a person my size or your size coming at you, like attacking you, you're not going to be able to like carefully position your kick to the
and even if you can, you're just going to piss them off more.
Yeah,
Any
yeah,
guy listening knows that there's a delayed onset of pain.
Yeah,
You can
and if
push
you have
through
adrenaline, if you have adrenaline, unless they got you on a perfect shot, even then, like you would piss them off. Like if they're attacking you, they're trying to throw punches at your face and you get a good groin shot, you're not stopping them. You're not stopping the train from coming.
Yeah, it's a terrible argument. It's like,
horrible.
just punch them in the balls or just eye gouge them. It's like, oh yeah, so I guess that's why no one ever gets sexually assaulted.
Exactly. Like,
I
mean, when it comes to self-defense, like I really think no-gi wins, and I really think a groin strike isn't your first, shouldn't be your only attack.
I'm just going to
go on.
If you had to pick a winner, I would say, I would say no-gi just because of the point you made about not relying on having using someone else's clothes. But if we just kind of expand that for a little bit,
go on.
I would kind of just say that it's almost a draw because
I don't know, man.
Hang on, shut up.
Shut up, white belt.
Because it's not like it's not like training gi makes you only competent in doing gi submission. Like it's not like because you only train in the gi, you're not skilled enough to control someone's back or to hold someone down on mount.
Or to do a rear naked choke.
Or to do a rear naked choke.
Yeah.
Like, so if like I said, if you had to choose a winner, you would choose no-gi because you are then putting zero submissions or controls using someone else's clothes. But it's not like, training in the gi, you have only got the skills to control someone when you're holding their sleeve.
Yeah.
No, right? Like if you only train in the gi, you never train no gi, right? And then you found yourself in a self-defense situation at the beach, right? Where essentially just wearing board shorts or whatever. It doesn't mean
budgies, man.
Budgie smugglers. Do you all of a sudden not be able to hold close guard or what? Like you still have the jiu-jitsu control skills and all those sort of things that are really what matters when it, like being able to do a rear naked choke versus a bow and arrow choke is not the defining factor in a self-defense situation. It's the jiu-jitsu skills as a whole.
Yeah.
And you learn them in the gi as well as no gi.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like if you had to choose a winner, yes, no gi. Yeah. But if you at the same time it's a draw.
It's very difficult to find someone that only knows how to do spider guard, right? Or only does lasso guard or worm guard or something that requires lapels and shit like that.
Yeah.
Like, if you're very, very skilled at those moves, that's great, but you probably have a base foundation on how to do takedowns, how to advance your position, how to maintain back control.
Yeah.
You're not, like you said, you're not only going to know those movements. However, if you only trained no-gi, then all of your repertoire would be applicable.
Yeah.
That's my counter argument. That, like you said, you're still going to have those skill sets and shit. If they're wearing a jacket, you probably could cross collar choke them for sure. However, no-gi, everything is applicable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except for heel hooks. I probably wouldn't. Oh, actually, funnily enough, I just derailed myself, but I saw a video on the internet of, I'm pretty sure it was on the streets of Brazil, but there was these two guys in a street fight, and one of them was trying to heel hook the other guy in a street fight. It was crazy.
Why?
It was crazy. I don't know. I don't know if they're both jiu-jitsu practitioners, but this guy had him in a full heel hook and was fucking him up with a heel hook in a street fight.
Like it just doesn't.
Insane.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you bother? Because it's no different than taking a tire iron to their leg. Like it's not something that the person's going to understand what's happening. All you're doing is just ripping their knee apart.
Yeah.
For why?
Yeah.
In self-defense, chokes are the way to go.
100%. And we spoke about that in our episode on self-defense, and you made the really good point that, you may not necessarily want to hurt your opponent. And you may be in a self-defense situation where it's a family member that's drunk or something crazy, right?
Yeah.
Or like you're a big 120 kilo dude, and if you're looking at a jiu-jitsu guy in self-defense versus Muay Thai and you're 120 kilos, Muay Thai guy is probably going to kill someone. Jiu-jitsu guy could probably control the situation a little bit more.
Well, what if you're just some poor bloke who works at Bunnings and a Karen walks in?
Yeah.
Like you
Starts attacking
you
you or
can't
some shit.
exactly punch a Karen in the I mean, everyone wants to punch a Karen
want to,
in the
yeah.
face, but you can't, that
Yeah.
should get you in lots of trouble.
Exactly.
But
To be honest, if we had to choose a winner, I'm going to lean toward no gi for this.
Yeah, I mean, if I have to choose one.
You have to choose.
Okay, no gi.
Excellent. See, we're agreeing. We're agreeing. This was my plan the whole time. Okay, so what's another category that we could go with?
Well, I mean, I think just the initial argument of whether gi's becoming obsolete. My thought is that we've spoken before about how no gi has grown a lot and become, the sort of main spectator sport. And due to the nature of it often being more scrambly because you don't have all the grips and controls. And I don't want to go too much into it because you can listen to it in, I think it was the episode we talked about the Olympics, which let me check what.
Oh, that was like episode 3, I think.
Episode 5, why Jiu-Jitsu is not in the Olympic Games, gi versus no gi, is IBJJF still relevant, blah, blah, blah. And so you can go back and listen to that episode, but we spoke a little bit about how the rules changed in judo to make it more entertaining as a spectator sport, to restrict any of the grips and positions that slowed down the fight, that as the fighter, when you're in the position, a lot's going on, but from a spectator point of view, there's not. And that's why no gi, I believe, is more entertaining. But what I think may happen is I really think that perhaps gi and no gi will just become two completely different sports.
Yeah, I agree.
And so it's not like the gi will become obsolete. I mean, it may become obsolete in the sense that it's not as popular as no-gi jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
That'll probably still be called jiu-jitsu and no-gi jiu-jitsu, but I kind of think, they'll become two different sports. So people will continue to train in the gi, and it might change from, at the moment, my philosophy currently, and I'm not saying this won't change, but my current philosophy is that you have to do both, right? They're both part of the same sport. They're disparate aspects of the sport. It's like, if you want to be well-rounded, you have to train the both of them, okay? But I do kind of feel that it's going in a direction where, you could look at gi jiu-jitsu would be judo and no gi jiu-jitsu would be wrestling. Because, I mean, if you look at stand-up as in stand-up grappling, that's kind of what they are to some extent, right? Like gi takedowns is judo and no gi takedowns is wrestling, but they're two completely different sports, right? And, they're so separate that people just train one or the other. Like, of course, there'd be the odd person out there who trains both, but, it's not like you do this one sport that both of those fall under. It's not like you train, I don't know, wrestling judo or something. And to do that, you have to do, gi takedowns and no gi takedowns. It's like, well, there's judo and wrestling. They're two different sports. And I feel that gi jiu-jitsu and no gi jiu-jitsu may go that way.
Yep.
And, they'll start to diverge so much, not because the reason that they'll diverge is not because they will start to have less in common. It's more just that, if you think about it, like it's these two paths that are together and that, like, they're starting to split apart. There's going to be more space pushed between the two of them as each one expands on its own.
It develops.
Right?
Yeah.
So, more no-gi. Well, no-gi is the one that's been developing the most currently, or, with leg locks and all that sort of stuff. But that then becomes, that's going to expand. But also gi stuff keeps getting reinvented and developing, and that expands. So they're pushing each other apart, and it will get to a point where there's too much information in one alone that you can't do both. Probably, I don't know, probably similar to, there's a lot of similarities between a motorbike and a car, but you're kind of either a motorbike mechanic or a car mechanic, right? Like, yeah, you could probably tinker in both, but if you're looking at the elite level, you
to specialize.
Yeah, you can't be someone who's a MotoGP mechanic and a Formula One mechanic, right? Like there's a lot of similarities, but they're too separate. At the moment, it's still where you kind of can do both, and my philosophy is you still need to do both. But I do think it's kind of going in a direction where they will become, to some degree, two different sports. And you'll have, I think it'll become more common to see gyms that solely are no-gi gyms, because it's like its own sport. The same way you walk into just like you don't walk into a wrestling gym and expect there to be you to learn some judo. Right? Nor do you walk into a judo gym and expect to learn some wrestling. And I think that may start to happen as well.
Yeah, I predict that, I think you're exactly right. I think we're going to see, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in its current form, continue and expand in that direction with the gi. However, I think that submission grappling is going to basically become a thing of its own. And the big names in submission grappling are pretty much heading toward that direction anyway. They're talking about it, approaching it, and training in that way. I think that
it's definitely being pushed as well a lot. Not pushed, but it's you could thank social media and flow grappling and all
MMA
that
as well. I would look at MMA,
guess,
because a lot of look at Buchecha now. He's made his MMA debut. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. He won with a north-south choke.
Yeah, it was sick. Yeah. But a lot of people in the jiu-jitsu world, a lot of the champions that people look up to are transitioning to MMA for money and expanding for lots of different reasons. But a lot of them go toward MMA, like Buchecha, like Gary Tonin. There's talks of Gordon Ryan going that way. I'm sure there's been way more in the past. Fuck, the early days of UFC was dominated by Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's what really put it on the global, map, really. So I think that no-gi is better suited to a transition to MMA. It's pretty obvious that it is, because there's no point training anything with a lapel if your intention is to transition to MMA. It just doesn't make sense. So from that, I think that there will definitely be submission grappling in whatever it looks like. It probably expand the rule sets that what it is today, but submission grappling will be its own thing and it will directly support MMA. That's my sort of prediction, which is really already happening, but I think it's just going to be a little bit more formalized.
Yeah, I think the more we talk about it,
You're getting depressed?
A little bit sad. I like no-gi and I'm more invested, and I find no-gi more enjoyable now with the development of leg locks and everything. They weren't what they are today when I first started training and when I was a competitive blue and purple belt. They weren't really a thing, leg locks. And I didn't really enjoy no-gi much at the time, probably due to my long giraffe neck and constantly getting guillotined, whereas now I can play footsies with people and my neck's a bit further away. But then on the flip side, I have terrible knees and I can drill heel hooks and then have sore knees the next day.
Yeah.
So, I'm not too concerned about it because I'm a bit past my I'm not past my competitive career, sitting here talking like I'm old. There's people well older than me who compete at a much higher level than I do.
You recently competed at a super fight.
It was supposed to be last weekend. But
there was supposed to be another one, but yeah.
So, I'm not that concerned about it. But I don't know, I really enjoy training in the gi. I like what I personally like about the gi is that I feel like it's just more tools on your belt. There's, you've got more or less everything you can do in no gi plus extra stuff. Some stuff doesn't really work in the gi because it gets in the way. Some no gi techniques and submissions don't work very well in the gi because the added gi and friction gets in the way.
Yeah.
But, more or less you can do all the same techniques plus all the cool gi stuff. And I, just me individually, I have fun doing all those things. It suits my style a bit better. Like I'm not an explosive wrestler, scrambler. I'm not super agile. And so the gi allows me to control it and slow it down a bit more.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I've never asked myself this question, but if I thought, where will jiu-jitsu be in 20 years? And I look ahead to 20 years and I think, man, am I going to be semi-forced to have a gym that is just a purely no-gi gym or like,
maybe,
kind of.
It depends on your approach, but I honestly think that in 20 years, no-gi is going to be even more popular and gi jiu-jitsu is going to be less so. And I mean, yeah, I know that.
Well, I think I would agree with that. That's already happening.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it will be to the point where at the moment, most in Australia, in Sydney, most jiu-jitsu gyms that you will find will train both gi and no gi.
Yeah.
I think that is a very safe statement. However, in 20 years, I think you'll find it may be 50-50 or it may be that most jiu-jitsu gyms are submission grappling no gi and the minority are incorporating the gi.
Yeah, and I wonder if the people who have the final say almost are the monopoly controlling media outlets for jiu-jitsu.
But it's also the consumer.
Yeah, it is, but like everyone's pretty much like flow grappling, right? So,
but then again,
included.
I will say that that's people in the sport. For someone that is like coming into jiu-jitsu, I think vast majority of people, this is a very blanket statement, so feel free to push back on this, but the vast majority of people coming to jiu-jitsu are doing so because of influences like MMA. They see it as a way to train MMA without being punched.
I don't think many people see gi jiu-jitsu and then start training jiu-jitsu.
100%.
It's usually, even for me, it came from MMA was when I first started training. And when
you fell in love with the gi, like I did.
Well, initially I absolutely hated it. My first couple of months in the gi, I hated it.
Same.
I was like, effing let go of me, bitch.
Same.
I hated it.
I would have way more success in no gi because I was like strong, fast. I could just bully people in the no gi.
But then I got used to like, but I can hold on to them.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So like, so those media outlets, let's say, because jiu-jitsu doesn't have this international governing body like judo does, right?
Despite the fact that people think that is in IBJJF.
Yeah, which it isn't really, right? I mean, they're just an organization, right? The same way everyone that Flow Grappling is just an organization. Who's number one and ADCC, they're all just organizations, right? Businesses, right? Jiu-jitsu doesn't have something like, wrestling in the US where it's, I don't know how the international standards work for wrestling, but I mean, it's in colleges, it's in high school. So it has this, like at least domestically, has this association that has the final word.
I believe it would have an international one because it's in the Olympics.
Because it's in the Olympics, right? So they've got these things that have the final word, whereas jiu-jitsu doesn't have that. So let's Flow Grappling or Gordon Ryan or whoever or Kieren, like these people that start saying like American jiu-jitsu and all this, what if they all of a sudden just start referring to no-gi jiu-jitsu as, not submission only because that's already.
They call it submission grappling, I think.
Yeah, or if they they start calling it sub-jitsu or something, right?
Yeah.
And then fast forward 10 years and that's like its own sport,
and organizations pop up around
the
it.
Sub-jiu-jitsu world champion. Then all of a sudden you've got, we're not a BJJ gym, we're a sub-jitsu gym, and 20 years down the track, you've got gyms that they're not no-gi gyms, they're sub-jitsu gyms or whatever it's bloody called. And
Mexican ground karate,
right? And that could happen because there's no governing body who can say, you can't make that shit up. No, right? There's just these media business outlets that can kind of do whatever they want and create their own sport.
So do you think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu needs an international governing body to put its foot down and say, this is Jiu-Jitsu? If if you want to, I know that IBJJF does have the whole, like, you need these requirements to have your belt recognized, blah, blah, blah. But if it was a little bit more formalized, like judo.
Yeah, I would like some more formality, because the buck has to stop with someone, right? Like, I would like a bit more regulation happening, and whether that is two different governing bodies, like one for gi and one for no gi, I'm fine with that too, right? But yeah, I don't know. Like, there needs to be someone. I mean, I don't care, man. Change the name from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like, American Jiu-Jitsu. Who bloody cares, man? It doesn't matter. But I think someone needs to be saying, what can go and what can't go. At the moment, it's just kind of anyone can do whatever they want, and whoever has the most social media presence or whatever, like whoever gets the most thumbs up, that almost becomes the default. Okay, that's how it is. And
I think to play devil's advocate, I think that really generates a lot of innovation, though. Like, I don't think we would have seen a lot of the no-gi innovation without, like, ADCC, for example, without the huge explosion of popularity in because of flow grappling or because of whatever, maybe because of MMA, a few different things. But I don't know if we would have seen as much innovation and the real push, like the leg lock game is a prime example. If these guys, if there was no money in it and these guys weren't superstars, and I'd argue that maybe leg locks wouldn't be such a meta in jiu-jitsu no-gi as they are today.
But, it's I agree with you, but the point I'm trying to make is there has to be a line somewhere.
Otherwise you get just rogue states, these cowboy things.
Like even ADCC, like they still have rules. You're not allowed to do small joint manipulation, right? You're not allowed to like bend fingers backwards and things like that. You're obviously not allowed to like eye gouge and whatever. Like, you have to have, the buck needs to stop with someone, and otherwise the same, silly example, but ADCC was the whole, the platform that allowed the innovation of leg locks and heel hooks and things like that. Well, what's to stop some other organization coming up that allows all this small joint manipulation and all these sort of things? Like, and some organization needs to be the final word to more or less decide what can go and what can't go. Otherwise, it is just this cowboy free for all, and it's not safe.
Well, there's so many different rule sets as well. Coming from someone new to the sport, and I mean, I know that even some more senior belts like get confused as hell with the rules from organization to organization. So when I sign up to compete in just about every bloody grappling competition in Sydney, right? Or in our sort of region, within driving distance, within reason, I fucking go to it. But I always have to read up on the rules if it's not IBJJF. Like, okay, can I do heel hooks to this? Okay, only intermediate and above. What's intermediate? Oh, you need to be a 1 year blue belt and above. Or like, there's so many different cowboy rule sets with some things I can do, some things I can't do. Prime example of that is, I know I've spoken about it before, but it's worth repeating in this context, is there was a member of the old Danaher Death Squad. I forget his name. Unfortunately, sorry to this guy. But he got disqualified from an IBJJF semi-final because of mouth covering.
What's his name? Tarza or something.
Yeah. And he covered the mouth and nose, and you can't do that in this rule set, but you can in ADCC.
Ones,
So, he defaulted to that because that's how they train, and he got DQ'd.
Just on Who's Number One this weekend, a dude got DQ'd for slamming.
Ah, right. So because slamming is allowed in ADCC, right?
I'm not sure. Maybe. I'm not sure. But yeah, I know that Who's Number One has its own rule set, because even this exhibition fight that Gordon Ryan's doing shortly is, he said, with Who's Number One rules. It's like,
why is that a thing?
Like, I mean, if you're just, you can't, it almost makes them, if you change the rules, you kind of change
the sport,
or you change the game mode, if you will. Like, you've got to, like, if you had soccer and you said, but in this one, the pitch is half the length, like, it's like, okay, well, it's a different type of soccer. Like, I mean, it's a different game now, so many things change when you change the rules. And jiu-jitsu being so complicated, like changing one rule can totally change like the way that you can connect techniques and whatever to get to certain positions to exploit whatever rule. And like in any high level sport or high level athlete, you're always trying to find, maybe not loopholes isn't the right word, but you're playing the game.
Yeah.
But
playing to win.
But yes,
we'll take slamming. Slamming is a really good example. I mean, you could look at any of my comp footage. Like I have been in position where I could fuck someone up if slamming was allowed.
Yeah.
However, it's not. So like I can lift them up and reposition and work a technique.
Yeah. But the same way the person on the bottom, like they don't need to divert a portion of their focus and energy towards not getting slammed because they know you're not allowed to do it. Right?
Yeah.
And why isn't slamming allowed? Because it's deemed not safe, right? Like yes, I know it's allowed in some rules and it's allowed in MMA, but as a whole, more or less in jiu-jitsu, it's deemed not safe, right?
Yeah.
And sorry?
I was just thinking of an example. The most recent comp in Sydney, just before the lockdown, there was this purple belt who's a coach at Gracie Barra Bondi. His name's Ricky.
Oh, yeah. I've met him a couple of times.
Real nice guy.
Yeah, he seems super nice. Yeah.
So shout out to Ricky if he's listening. He probably is. But he got slammed in I think it was the semi-finals. It was in the semi-finals of his weight division, or it might have even been Absolute. Anyway, I think it was Absolute. He got slammed by this big guy because he had a triangle locked up, and the guy after it was like, it was a Hail Mary. I knew I was fucking going to lose anyway. I was about to tap, so I thought, fuck it, and just decided to slam him. Like, what a piece of shit.
What a piece of shit.
Like, knows he's losing, but just goes, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to slam this kid anyway.
Yeah, that's just a prick, right?
Yeah,
I mean, anyway. like when we're talking about drug use and stuff in
it's the same sort
the
of
other
thing.
episode, we're saying, well, if it's against the rules, then you're a prick if you do it because then you're cheating.
Yeah.
And so I think, like they could be two separate governing bodies, like one for gi and one for no gi. Like I don't care, but otherwise, if you constantly have all these different organizations with different rules, like each little organization could argue it's a different sport. Like, let's say you and I start an organization and it can be no gi, right? And our rules are slightly different to who's number one and ADCC. They're slightly different. And then fast forward 5 years and we're bigger and better than Flow Grappling, who's number one and ADCC. And we decide, we don't want to be associated with them anymore. So no, our rules are this. So we changed the name of the sport, but it's still jiu-jitsu and everyone's doing it.
Yep. Okay. So again, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I think we're getting onto some pretty good topics. So
I'm getting angry, Kieren.
Yeah, I know. I can sense it, but I want to channel this, right? Okay. Devil's advocate time. Couldn't I argue that the best ideas will rise to the top? That the consumers, that the practitioners, that the athletes, that the attention, the eyeballs will go toward what is most entertaining, what is the best rule sets. Because if something is dangerous, right? If say that an organization comes along, has the exact same rules as ADCC, but you're allowed to, eye gouge. People aren't going to compete in that. You know what I mean?
What do you mean they won't?
I'm saying that I don't think that the best athletes in the world would compete in an organization like that has the exact same rules as ADCC, but they can get, lose their vision permanently. I don't think they would do that.
People do crazy shit. Some
would, but I think
eye gouging is quite an extreme example.
It is.
I think
that's a bit of a straw man.
But like let's say something a bit more realistic that I mentioned earlier, like small joint manipulation.
But if that made the sport more entertaining.
But more entertaining doesn't always mean what's right, and
that's a good point.
Like you can start looking at what's like ethically correct and what's morally correct.
Because if it was more entertaining, you would have like gladiators. Like we would see
right.
We would see like literal gladiator fights.
Like
right?
if you had this switch that you could turn off, if you could turn off your conscience and your whatever else, things that your morals and everything, if you just talked like what would be entertaining, well, like why do you think watching like gladiators fight in a movie is fun? Like, because I mean, imagine being able to literally watch like a samurai war and you having zero care about a literal father, just a real person getting beheaded or
look
whatever.
At history, right? Look at history. Like okay, we're getting a bit weird and off topic, but this is relevant. But look at history, okay? So if you were a Roman back when the Colosseum was in full blast and you had huge gladiator spectacles, you can't sit there and say, no, I wouldn't go. That's barbaric, because it's insane. It's ingrained. Like,
At the
history
time, yeah.
has proven that human nature is attracted to watching people fucking fight to the death. So if for whatever reason, kind of like a death race, if you've seen that, like for whatever reason, in 20 years' time, if in some bizarre fucking crazy land it was legalized somewhere and they started televising gladiator wars with willing participants, I think it would have insane viewership. I think it would be one of the most popular sports in the world.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to go out there and say
it doesn't mean it's right, you know?
I totally agree. And that's, I totally agree. It's fucked.
Yeah. So I always refer to this sport in a lot of episodes because it's one I follow, but I think it's super relevant to this conversation, which would be Formula One.
Yep.
And for those who don't know and don't follow Formula one of the issues that the sport currently has, and they're making changes for the coming season, but one of the issues Formula One currently has is the racing is seemed as not being very competitive because of the way the aerodynamics of the car work, and it more or less makes it like kind of impossible for the car behind to ever overtake the car in front because of the way the aerodynamics are disrupted when you're behind a car and all these sort of things, right?
Okay.
And so it's kind of like the racing isn't super close, right? But a lot of the things that have taken it to this aerodynamic phase that has not allowed the racing to be super close is because of all the new rules over the years that have been put in to make it safe, right? If anyone has recently watched the Netflix documentary that came out, I think it's just called Schumacher, about Michael Schumacher. So he started racing in time where, man, racing was super close. It was almost like destruction derby, like Dodgem cars, but in Formula One cars going 300 kilometers an hour, right? And that's all fun and games, and it's way more entertaining to watch. Like, anyone who's a racing fan, it's super entertaining to watch close racing. But then, like, once there's an accident and someone dies, right? Like Ayrton Senna died, right? Racing against Schumacher. And then all of a sudden, like, it's not fun anymore. Like, because we're not in gladiator times. Like, society has evolved to...
We care about people's lives.
We care about people and stuff like that. And so one of the biggest criticisms that the Formula One cars have gotten recently is this thing called a halo, right? And it's this ring that sits above the cockpit to protect drivers' heads. Because, you know, like, if you don't know what a halo is and you probably just think about a Formula One car, the dudes are just sitting in the car, right? And their head's just right there. There's nothing over their head to protect them, right? Whereas now there's like this ring that sits above it. It's called a halo. And people were all up in arms because, like, it made the cars look ugly and this, and they didn't like it and blah, blah, blah. And there's been something like, since its introduction a couple of years ago, there's been like 3 or 4 crashes that the driver would have died if it wasn't for the halo. There was one just the other weekend where a car went on top of the other car, and the wheel of the car literally hit the other driver in the helmet, and the floor of the car crushed down onto the halo. Like, this guy would have been literally run over by a Formula One car. Another guy's car split in half and he went through a guardrail, and the halo saved his life. Right. You know, and the rant that I'm going on is that if you go back to early days racing or Formula One, right? Super entertaining, but super fucking dangerous, bro. Right. And you ask the drivers themselves in this Schumacher documentary, like, Michael Schumacher talks about, like, the thoughts he was having after, like, Ayrton Senna died, and he died racing against him, you know? And then how did he feel about turning up the next weekend to race? And he said he was going around the track pre-race, and he was like, could die there, could die there, right? And, you know, so it's not really ethical now. And this is a bit of a long-winded way to say, well, that could happen with jiu-jitsu. If there's no regulating body, like, no one, like, stopping the buck to say, we define this as the sport of sub-jitsu or no-gi or gi or whatever, then, just because someone wants to change the rules to make it more entertaining doesn't mean it's right.
I agree. I think that it is a fine line. Obviously, you're going to incorporate some form of risk. We don't want to see jiu-jitsu where they're, wrapped up in cotton wool and bubble wrap and it's fucking, they high five knuckles and then they cuddle and whoever does the best cuddle wins. No one wants to see that. I think that obviously you're not saying that there shouldn't be some form of risk. You've spoken about many times that it's a full contact sport. Be prepared for that. Look at my fucking, knee that we're talking about last episode.
Yeah.
Prime example. However, I think that you do need to take ethics into account for jiu-jitsu. There does need to be a balance between the two. And I also think that as the current rule set is, particularly IBJJF, I don't think that it is at a stage, I don't think it's resolved. I still feel as though the rules, the sport has a bit of a way to go before it's at its perfect balance between entertaining, super entertaining to watch, and safe for the competitor, and something that can be easily, repeated, more or less easily understood. So, simple, so new people can, learn the sport. I still think there needs to be a little bit more development in the rule sets. And I think that organizations like ADCC and, who's number one, they're attempting to do that, but there's still something missing. I don't know.
Yeah. It's probably just due to it being a relatively young sport.
Oh, I
right?
agree, yeah.
The rules keep changing because the techniques keep changing and keep getting developed, right? So, that you could find people wanting to compete in eye gouging and whatever. But yeah, as a whole, the masses want something that's entertaining but safe, because the majority of people don't want to see someone get grotesquely injured, right? Because we're not gladiators anymore. If you get caught stealing a loaf of bread, they don't cut your hands off anymore.
Yeah.
This isn't medieval times. So the masses want to, if they're a competitor in it, they want to feel safe, right? And the viewers want it to be safe, but also super entertaining.
A thought just occurred to me when it comes to the no gi versus gi sort of conversation. Do you think that jiu-jitsu is trying to be something it's not? You know what I mean? Let me try to expand on this a little bit. There's a plethora of sports out there that aren't very entertaining. And we spoke about that in episode 5 when we spoke about should jiu-jitsu be in the Olympics. And we're basically using the example of gymnastics or swimming or something like that. Unless you're watching the best of the best in the world, you're not going to sit down and watch fucking regional swimming championships. How fucking boring, unless you're a swimmer, right?
Yeah.
So jiu-jitsu is trying to develop in such a way that it is entertaining for the layperson or for someone that doesn't necessarily know a lot of jiu-jitsu to be entertained by it, like MMA can do or like boxing can do. You don't need to be an MMA competitor to be entertained by the UFC. Man, that shit's hyper entertaining. And jiu-jitsu is trying to develop a rule set, form itself or morph itself into something that is entertaining as a spectator sport. But do you think it's trying to be something it's not?
Yeah, if you phrase it like that, I think it is, because if that's what one of these organizations' approach is, it's fundamentally flawed, because jiu-jitsu's at its core, outside of the wrestling grappling as a whole, it's not something that on its own makes sense to an uneducated person. And what I mean by that is, well, MMA, even though it has wrestling and jiu-jitsu aspects to it, even if you know nothing about it, it's just two people fighting, what punching someone in the face does or whatever. It's just, it makes sense instantly. You might watch a fight that goes to the ground and you have no idea what's going on, but they're still trying to punch each other and it makes sense, right? Yeah, Formula One, racing, even, it makes sense. Even if someone doesn't know anything about it, they know that it's a race.
Car
right?
go fast, car win.
Yeah, right? Whereas, jiu-jitsu's, without being educated about jiu-jitsu, if let's say we grab someone who's never trained and we Like they don't even understand. Even people who do train, but they haven't learnt a heel hook yet, they don't even understand. You can show it to them, but until they feel it on them, they almost like, they don't even understand why it hurts. Like, it makes no sense to them, right? So the approach to think that jiu-jitsu will just be entertaining because it's a fight, like it just doesn't make sense. It's a different sport. I don't think that approach would ever work. I think it's fundamentally flawed. Whereas MMA, it's like, it's seen as this no rules contest, right? Like to someone who doesn't know better, it's seen as
full
this
combat, anything goes.
Yeah,
within like very few.
Obviously there are rules.
Yeah, but they've like, man. Yeah, okay, so you can't groin strike, you can't eye gouge, the stuff that we sort of covered. But everything else, good to go, man. You can elbow someone in the fucking face. That's
but even then there's rules. You can't 12-6 elbow.
Which is a little bit ridiculous, but anyway.
You can't like
back of the head shots and little things like
can't
that.
Kick or grounded opponents.
Yeah, like that. With those being the very few exceptions. But apart from that, you can pretty much do anything you fucking want.
But ask someone who's, who has a son or something who trains jiu-jitsu and they don't train themselves. Like, and I know this, I've had this conversation with friends where, they're, maybe they were on the bottom of mount and their dad was like, well, why didn't you just get up? He's like, God. But like that, like it's
get up, you give the back. Yeah.
Like,
so it's lack of education.
And jiu-jitsu,
it's too nuanced. It's too complex.
Yeah, it's too complex to just get that, and it's the same as, you said gymnastics. It's a bit different because gymnastics as a whole, you can look at it and be like, cool, they did a bunch of flips.
Cool.
That looks cool.
Yeah, but some gymnastics is fucking boring. Like if you watch some of the gymnastics, like, okay, cool, whatever.
But even with gymnastics, there's moves in gymnastics that you're not allowed to do that athletes are physically capable of doing,
right,
but they're against the rules because they're seen as too dangerous.
I didn't even know that.
Right.
There you go.
In ice skating, in figure skating, there's another one. There was a period of time where there was this this girl who would do a backflip in figure skating. And that's now illegal. You're not allowed to do that because it's deemed as too dangerous because it stops with someone.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like someone just makes another organization of figure skating where you're allowed to backflip.
Yeah. And then it creates a scenario where
and then
like
it forces everyone,
exactly.
you have to then backflip.
Like we're talking about with steroids, if you have a sport where all the best athletes are openly on steroids.
You then have to take steroids.
You have to take steroids to be if you want to be the best in the world. It's the exact same conversation. So
I think as
this is complex, hey?
Yeah, I think if I was to put a final stamp on it, what do I see happening and what do I think should happen? Like, I mean, I don't like to think that gi and no gi will become two completely different sports. I mean, like I said, they'll always be connected the same way a motorbike and a car are connected, but they're two different things. I don't want to see that happen because I love both of them, but I believe it will happen. They'll individually become so much knowledge you need to know in gi alone and in no gi alone that they'll push each other apart. That'll be a sad day because I love training and teaching both of them, but I think that'll happen. And then I think each individually, like it needs a official governing body to say, this is the sport. Right? Like otherwise you can just do whatever the hell you want, and there needs to be rules and regulations for consistency, for safety, for a whole plethora of reasons.
And unfortunately, the way I see it, and in my very, narrow sort of perspective on it, admittedly, but the way I see it is we're stepping even further and further away from that happening. Like again, in my opinion, the biggest chance Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu had as a governing body was IBJJF. But as time passes, I think IBJJF is becoming less and less relevant.
And I think that's due to them not putting enough, I don't want to say not putting enough effort. Like maybe it was just from a business point of view, they didn't see the opportunity because sometimes, a lot of things in business can be seeing something and having a hunch and taking a gamble or whatever.
Taking the risk.
And they just didn't capitalize, or perhaps they didn't feel it was worth the risk, but they didn't get in on no-gi's explosion.
Yeah.
And, and that's sort of why they've become a bit less relevant. But
I think if
You know,
we
I don't want to see all this bullshit of American Jiu Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, who's number one rules, ADCC rules. Man, like, you know, someone needs to draw a freaking line.
if we had an organization like the UFC that came in, because UFC isn't MMA. UFC is simply an organization that has a championship for MMA.
Yeah.
If we saw a organization like the UFC come along and all of the best competitors in the world flocked to that organization because they had the best rule set, it was the most entertaining, they had the most viewership, and they were offering enough money, and people could actually make a living being a jiu-jitsu athlete, I think when that day comes, that's when we'll see that organization as being the governing body for the sport.
Yeah, it might work out that way because without having to answer to a higher organization like the IOC, like if you're an Olympic sport, you know, so, you know, until you have to answer to well, even then, right? Like, for example, ice hockey, the rules for like the NHL would be the biggest league in the world. There's quite big leagues in Europe as well, but like the American Canadian League, the NHL would be the biggest one that's most well known. Their rules are slightly different to the hockey that they play in the Olympics, right? Only slightly different, but you know, and I think the league in Europe might be a little different as well. But you know, like unless you're answering to a bigger governing body like the IOC,
they have to stay somewhat aligned, right? Otherwise, you're going to make one of them obsolete, and you know.
But yeah, if with anything goes, it's just not cool, man. I'll actually tell you a story, and I don't know if it was MotoGP or it might have been World Superbike, but anyway, motorbike racing. There was this rider, I can't remember his name, but on multiple occasions when he was racing side by side with another rider, he would take his foot off the peg and kick.
Oh, you're joking.
And I mean, do you think...
What a fucking... Oh, wow.
And entertaining? Maybe. Do you think it should be allowed? Fucking no, bro. He could kill that person. Yeah. These bikes are doing like 300 plus kilometers an hour, you know?
Because technically, let me guess, it wasn't in the rules that you can't do it. So he got
away with it? It was. No, I think he got permanently banned from racing, I believe.
Okay. Good.
Or at least in that competition circuit or something. Yeah, he did it multiple. No, sorry, I'm telling that story wrong. He's probably done that as well. No, what he did was he took he's side by side racing another guy doing whatever kilometers an hour. He took his hand off his handlebars and reached over and squeezed on the other dude's front brake.
Wow.
And I mean, luckily the other dude didn't crash.
Yeah.
But man, like, so if you don't, I mean, this is a sport that has rules to say you can't do shit like that, and people still do it. So like, you know, if the buck's not stopping with someone, what's to stop shit like that? What's to stop stuff in Formula One where like Formula One's rule book is like 800 pages long, bro. And they have the FIA, which is who says what you can do. And there's heaps of stuff that they deem what's safe and not safe. Like one in racing is when you have a car coming up behind you, you're only allowed to
do like one move or something.
Yeah, you're only allowed to move across the track to defend once. You can't like zig because it's deemed too dangerous. Whereas back in the day, you could do that. And I would argue it was probably super entertaining to watch, but only, you know, one too many people need to die, and you go, hang on.
That just comes back to our line versus like safety for the competitors, the athletes, for even general practitioners of people trying to emulate, and entertainment value.
But I think if we're answering the initial question of the episode, is gi becoming obsolete? No, but it's becoming. I don't think it's becoming less popular. It's that maybe just no gi is becoming more popular.
Proportionally,
it is less popular. You know, I don't think people would, you know, I don't want to say they'll never stop training it because, you know, who could say? But I mean, people still train judo. It's not like people have seen judo as like, oh, well, it's useless when people don't have a gi, or it's useless in MMA. People still train judo and everything. I don't know. Maybe that's helped that it's in the Olympics. I'm not sure. But you know, like I said, I have fun training in the gi, so I don't want to stop training in the gi. But yeah, it's definitely, as time goes on, no gi is just becoming more and more popular, more accessible, and they'll probably just go their own separate ways, I think.
Yeah, I have to agree.
I just want someone to be in charge of it.
Next minute, Adam Child's Jiu Jitsu Federation is coming live. But I think that's a good place to end it. I mean, we sort of danced around the topic, but I really enjoyed the approach that we ended up taking, talking more about the evolution of no gi and whether, we kind of got a little bit philosophical about entertainment value versus ethics. So yeah, I think that could be definitely expanded in a discussion for another day. But
yeah, and I mean, it's a hard line to draw, right? I know we're just wrapping it up, but we spoke about slamming, and some of the probably the most famous slam would be like Rampage Jackson. Do you know Rampage Jackson? Yeah. Like I don't know if his famous knockout slam was in Pride or in the UFC, but I mean, essentially slamming someone down onto the back of their head,
knocking them
knocking them the hell out. Like crazy entertaining. Like quite, it's entertaining because the crowd goes wild.
Yeah.
But, I reckon that could be, it's still in MMA. That's a rule you could see if some dude becomes paraplegic or breaks his neck and dies from it. Like that's things can be entertaining, but also once it goes, what do your parents always say? Oh, it's fun until someone gets hurt when you're wrestling.
All fun and games.
All fun and games until someone gets hurt, right? And
it's still fun.
But that's,
as long as you're not the one that's hurt.
That's the line that they're trying to walk.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you got to allow for some sort of accidents. But if there's something that,
of course, that's it as well. I don't want to say that, right? Yeah. Like obviously, to some degree, you don't
want a knee-jerk reaction, right? Yeah. Like, someone didn't tap to an armbar and their arm breaks. Well, fuck, it's part and parcel. Should have tapped you, dickhead. Yeah. But if, say, for example, if next minute, like next few years, slamming kills like 3 people just from this one move, and they're like, obviously the UFC and MMA governing bodies will be like, oh, should we do that?
Imagine if someone took that approach. Like, imagine if they went, okay, this is my entire strategy.
I want to slam the fuck up.
Like I've been training with Eddie Hall, Brian Shaw. All I'm practicing is like lifting Atlas stones and and hurling them into the center of the earth.
Yeah.
My entire strategy is slamming people and knocking them out. And imagine, right?
Yeah.
Like people could do that if it's in the certain competitions you're allowed to slam. People could go, I'm going to get into closed guard and or a triangle or whatever, and I'm just going to slam you.
Repeatedly. Yeah.
And if you imagine getting slammed by like Brian Shaw or Eddie Hall. Like it would kill you.
Well, you can slam in Polaris in their most a couple of years ago. I think when it was last on Polaris, the super fight in the UK, they allow slamming. And the other reason I know that is because I saw a match between Jeremy and I'm not sure if it was Polaris, but anyway, one of those sort of super fights, slamming's allowed. And Jeremy was shot for a triangle. He got it. He got slammed, but then it just sunk the opponent deeper into the triangle. And so he's like, oh yeah.
But I mean, like it's entertaining, right? And I guess that's
super entertaining.
I mean, that's a great example. Slamming's a great example of like what is entertaining, but you could see it cross the line at the same time. But I mean, the athletes know there's risks. Of course, it is a combat sport.
Yep.
The same way, no matter what precautions are put into, motorbike and car racing or, surfing, like Andy Irons or Bruce Irons, one of the best surfers in the world, died years ago. Like, like there's always risks, right?
100%.
But anyway, we'll see what the future holds, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So make sure you revisit this episode in 20 years.
Yeah. We'll see. But if you did enjoy the episode, feel free to jump over to our Instagram. It's @BeyondJujitsu_podcast. If you want to support the show further, we have a link tree there. You can jump over to our Patreon. You can watch this on YouTube, follow us, all that good gear. Thanks for supporting the show and listening. And until next time, guys, see ya.